What if the people least suited to lead are exactly the ones most likely to rise into leadership positions? Picture this. You walk into a boardroom or a government chamber and realize the person holding the most power is perhaps the one who deserves it the least. Could our systems, political, corporate, and social, be fundamentally flawed in how they choose leaders? Look around. In politics, business, and institutions across the globe, the same disturbing pattern repeats itself. Take Richard Nixon. He climbed to the peak of American power, only to tarnish his legacy with the Watergate scandal. Despite his intellect and experience, Nixon's paranoia, deception, and moral compromises led to his downfall. Yet it was those very same traits, ruthless pragmatism, a willingness to bend rules, that propelled his ascent in the first place. Nearly 500 years ago, Niccolò Machiavelli witnessed this same pattern in Renaissance Italy. In his controversial classic The Prince, he wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, to few to come in touch with you." In other words, appearance beats reality when it comes to leadership. Machiavelli wasn't promoting deception. He was exposing a dark, enduring truth about human psychology and power. Modern research backs him up. A study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that overconfident individuals are often perceived as more competent, even when their abilities don't match the perception. Today, we'll explore why our leadership structures reward traits that should, in fact, disqualify someone: narcissism, dishonesty, even foolishness. We'll see how Machiavelli's insights from the 16th century echo in today's psychology of power, and we'll look at rare exceptions, leaders and organizations that break this pattern, and what we can learn from them. Machiavelli warned, "The prince must consider how to avoid those things which make him hated or contemptible. It makes him contemptible to be considered fickle, frivolous, effeminate, mean-spirited, irresolute, from all of which a prince should guard himself as from a rock." What was he really saying? That leadership rewards those who appear unshakably confident and decisive. In today's language, this gives narcissists an edge in leadership battles. Imagine you're lost in the woods with a group of strangers. Two people step forward to lead. One says, "I think I know the way, but I'm not entirely sure. There are several paths we could take." The other insists, "I know exactly where we need to go. Follow me, no doubts." Even though the first person is honest, admitting the uncertainty, most people will follow the second. Why? Because we gravitate towards certainty, even when it's false. Have you seen this happen in your own workplace or community? That magnetic pull toward the bold voice, even when a cautious one might be wiser. A comprehensive meta-analysis published in Personnel Psychology, analyzing 54 studies, found that narcissistic traits, supreme confidence, charismatic self-presentation, and bold visions help individuals get selected for leadership. But these same traits don't make for effective leaders once they're in charge. In fact, companies led by narcissistic CEOs show 27% more volatility in performance and are 33% more likely to suffer negative market reactions to major decisions. Take former WeWork CEO Adam Neumann. He convinced investors to value his office-sharing startup at $47 billion, despite staggering financial losses. His grand vision and self-assured charisma made him look like a revolutionary leader, until the illusion collapsed. When reality failed to match his promises, WeWork's valuation dropped by over 80%. The psychology behind all this is simple. We're wired to follow confidence, especially in moments of uncertainty. Machiavelli once noted that nothing makes a prince so esteemed as great enterprises and setting a fine example. In other words, the appearance of greatness often matters more than actual competence. And yet, there are rare but powerful exceptions to this pattern. Take Seretse Khama, the former president of Botswana. He led his country from being one of Africa's poorest nations to one of its most stable and prosperous democracies. Unlike many post-colonial African leaders who cultivated personality cults, Khama ruled with humility and pragmatism. He focused not on personal power, but on building strong institutions. Under his leadership, Botswana's GDP rose from $69 million in 1966 to over $8.4 billion by 2000. Life expectancy climbed from 52 to 60 to 65 years. Kama's story proves that while narcissism may help people attain power, it is steadiness, integrity, and a genuine concern for citizen welfare that create enduring legacies. Think about it. When you reflect on the leaders who've truly transformed their communities or organizations, do you notice this distinction between the traits that help someone gain power and the ones that help them use it wisely? Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone admits how praiseworthy it is in a prince to keep his word and to behave with integrity rather than cunning. Nevertheless, our experience has been that those princes who have done great things have considered keeping their word of little account and have known how to beguile men's minds by shrewdness and cunning." This is one of his most infamous observations, that successful leaders often employ deception. Modern readers recoil at what sounds like an endorsement of lying. But Machiavelli wasn't promoting dishonesty. He was making a realistic observation about the tactics that tend to succeed in power struggles. An effective deception? It's rarely about bold lies. It's more like a magician's misdirection. Why? Because authenticity resonates. In a world dominated by spin, truth becomes magnetic. But here's the twist. The most dangerous deception isn't what leaders tell their followers. It's what they tell themselves. A 2023 study in organizational behavior and human decision processes found that power increases self-deception by 42%. The more power leaders gain, the more they begin to believe their own myths, even when the evidence contradicts them. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. The leader believes their own narrative. That belief makes them more convincing. Their growing influence reinforces the narrative. And soon, perception becomes indistinguishable from reality, for them and for others. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Machiavelli's insight here reveals something profound. Truly intelligent leaders surround themselves with other intelligent people, while insecure leaders prefer the company of fools. But this creates a paradox in leadership selection. Leaders who appear intellectually simple can sometimes gain advantages that more thoughtful leaders cannot. Think of it as the beer test in politics. The idea that voters often prefer candidates they'd enjoy having a beer with, rather than those who seem too intellectual or complex. This isn't just anecdotal, it's backed by psychology. Social scientists call it the pratfall effect, a phenomenon where highly competent individuals become more relatable and likable when they show minor weaknesses or imperfections. In contrast, those who seem flawless or overly intellectual can feel distant and unrelatable. Ask yourself, when you think about the leaders who've risen rapidly in your field, are they the most thoughtful, nuanced thinkers, or the ones who offer simple, decisive answers with unwavering confidence? We often mistake simplicity for clarity. Consider George W. Bush's presidency. Despite graduating from Yale and Harvard Business School, he adopted a folksy, down-to-earth communication style that resonated with voters, many of whom would have found a more academic or intellectual tone alienating. The psychology behind this runs deep. Humans have a built-in discomfort with ambiguity and complexity. We crave certainty, even when certainty is impossible. Leaders who deliver simple narratives and clear answers tap directly into this need, even when the problems they're addressing require nuanced, layered solutions. A Stanford study of 952 CEOs revealed that leaders who communicated in simpler language were 23% more likely to be hired and received 16% higher initial compensation packages. But there's a cost. Those same leaders were also 31% more likely to underperform in complex environments where nuanced thinking was essential. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He once advised, "A prince ought to have no other aim or thought, nor select anything else for his study than war and its rules and discipline. For this is the sole art that belongs to him who rules." This wasn't only about warfare. It was a broader lesson. Focus on what appears practical and direct, rather than getting caught up in abstract or theoretical concerns. This creates what we might call the complexity trap in leadership. Those most capable of navigating true complexity are often the least likely to be selected because their honest acknowledgement of uncertainty makes them appear less confident, less decisive than their simpler counterparts. Then comes one of Machiavelli's most quoted lines. "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." This captures a paradox at the heart of leadership psychology. Empathy and traditional virtues, while morally admirable, can become strategic liabilities in leadership contexts. Machiavelli wasn't urging cruelty. In fact, he warned leaders to avoid behavior that incites hatred. Instead, he acknowledged that too much empathy can stop a leader from making the hard, necessary decisions. Modern psychological research confirms this. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals in positions of power showed reduced mirror neuron activity, the part of the brain responsible for empathy, when observing others in distress. The researchers concluded that diminished empathy might be an adaptation, a psychological shield that enables people to make difficult leadership decisions. Think of it like a surgeon's detachment. If a surgeon felt the full emotional weight of cutting into a patient, they might freeze, unable to act. And yet, without that detachment, lives wouldn't be saved. Machiavelli recognized this when he wrote, "Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived." Leaders with reduced empathy are often more willing to use deception, simply because they're less disturbed by its consequences. This connects directly to how virtues function in leadership. Machiavelli observed, "Thus, it is well to seem merciful, faithful, humane, religious, upright, and to be so. But with a mind so framed that, should you require not to be so, you may be able and know how to change to the opposite." This counterintuitive insight exposes one of the strangest paradoxes in leadership psychology. Sometimes, traditional virtues like honesty, humility, and kindness can produce worse outcomes than their opposites. Not because these virtues are inherently flawed, but because their effectiveness depends entirely on context. Consider how former German Chancellor Angela Merkel navigated the European refugee crisis. Her decision to accept over 1 million refugees in 2015 required balancing humanitarian empathy with pragmatic concerns about integration, resources, and public opinion. Had she been purely empathetic or entirely pragmatic, the result might have been far worse for everyone involved. Her wisdom lay in knowing when to lead with compassion and when to enforce limits. But not all leadership models are so Machiavellian. The servant leadership model, developed by Robert Greenleaf in the 1970s, suggests that leaders who prioritize the needs of their followers over personal ambition often generate better long-term outcomes. Costco provides a powerful case study. Under CEO Jim Sinegal, Costco paid wages 40% above industry average and provided health care to 85% of employees, while competitors only covered 47%. The results? Employee turnover, just 17%, compared to the 44% industry average. And during Sinegal's tenure, Costco's stock outperformed Walmart by 300%. So, the real challenge isn't choosing between virtue and effectiveness, but developing the wisdom to know which virtues serve the greater good in a given situation. As Aristotle, whom Machiavelli almost certainly studied, once said, "Virtue isn't about following rigid rules, but applying principles appropriately to each unique situation." Machiavelli echoed this when he wrote, "There is such a difference between how one lives and how one ought to live, that he who abandons what is done for what ought to be done learns his ruin rather than his preservation." This insight captures the fundamental flaw in leadership selection. The attributes that help someone win a leadership competition are often different from, and sometimes opposed to, the traits that make for effective leadership once the position is secured. It's like casting an actor to play a doctor in a movie versus hiring an actual doctor to perform surgery. The actor who looks the part, tall, authoritative, with perfect posture and teeth, might win the role. But that same person would be useless in an operating room. Likewise, the candidates who perform leadership most convincingly often beat out those who would actually lead most effectively. How often have you seen the most qualified person lose out to the most impressive performer? Modern research confirms this unsettling pattern. Studies show that individuals with narcissistic traits are more likely to emerge as leaders in group settings. But once in power, those same traits frequently lead to poor leadership outcomes. This creates what psychologists call the leadership paradox. The very traits that help someone rise to power can make them poor stewards of it. The psychology behind this paradox is deeply rooted in evolution. Studies suggest that humans evolved to respond to signals of dominance and confidence when choosing leaders, especially in threatening environments. This made sense in ancient contexts, where physical protection and immediate survival were critical. But in modern organizations, where collaboration, empathy, and strategic thinking are far more important, those same instincts now work against us. Research from the University of California shows that our leadership selection criteria today remain strikingly similar to those used by chimpanzees. We instinctively prefer individuals who project confidence, height, vocal power, and social dominance, even though these traits have little to no correlation with effective modern leadership. Machiavelli recognized this timeless tension when he wrote, "The people are the masses. The nobility are the leadership class who wish to rule over the people. The people have won." Ready for me to refine the next section too? At the heart of society lies a simple desire, not to be dominated or oppressed by the powerful. Yet the nobility, by contrast, often seek only to dominate and oppress the people. This creates a troubling cycle. Our systems for selecting leaders may be systematically choosing precisely the wrong kinds of individuals. The ones most eager to lead are frequently the least fit to do so wisely, while those best suited for leadership often shy away from the pursuit of power altogether. Take Nelson Mandela, for example. He did not become South Africa's president by chasing power, but by earning moral authority through 27 years of imprisonment. His approach to leadership, rooted in reconciliation rather than revenge, shows how individuals who defy the Machiavellian mold can drive transformational change. Similarly, Abraham Lincoln was once dismissed as awkward and unpolished. Yet his thoughtful, empathetic leadership proved uniquely capable of guiding America through its greatest crisis. These exceptions hint at a deeper truth. While our current leadership selection systems may favor narcissists and manipulators, there are better ways. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them." This famously cynical remark captures his pragmatic stance on leadership ethics. But it would be a mistake to see this merely as an endorsement of deception. Instead, Machiavelli was pointing to a psychological truth. In leadership, perception often outweighs reality. He challenges us to design systems that account for this. If appearance often outshines substance, how do we ensure that our leaders truly possess the virtues required for effective leadership? The solution may lie in redesigning our systems to work with human psychology rather than against it. Ancient societies provide intriguing models. The Venetian Republic, for instance, combined election and random selection to appoint its doge, deliberately structured to prevent any one faction from monopolizing power. Other societies required leaders to periodically step down, protecting them from the psychological corruption that prolonged authority brings. Modern organizations are beginning to experiment with similar innovations. Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, employs what founder Ray Dalio calls radical transparency, a system where employees at every level can critique leadership decisions, and where even the CEO undergoes regular, anonymous performance evaluations. This model disrupts the echo chambers that often reinforce narcissistic leadership. By combining Machiavellian wisdom with modern psychological research, organizations can adopt safeguards to protect themselves from manipulation and corruption. First, prioritize actual results over performance in interviews. Research shows that past behavior is a far better predictor of future actions than how someone handles a high-stakes conversation. Second, avoid granting leaders permanent power immediately. Introduce mandatory trial periods, during which feedback is collected from all levels, a method known as a 360 degrees review, before making long-term commitments. Third, separate the power to propose actions from the power to approve them. When both reside in one person, it creates a dangerous concentration of control and invites manipulation. To prevent groupthink and ensure decisions are critically examined, assign someone the formal role of devil's advocate. Their job is to question assumptions, challenge leadership, and bring alternative viewpoints to the surface. Lastly, impose term limits and rotate leadership roles. Long-term control inevitably breeds stagnation and corruption. Machiavelli understood this better than most. But perhaps most importantly, Machiavelli's insights suggest that the focus should shift away from individual leaders and toward the systems that contain them. As he wrote, "A prince, therefore, being compelled knowingly to adopt the beast, ought to choose the fox and the lion. The lion cannot defend himself against snares. The fox cannot defend himself against wolves. Therefore, one must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to scare off wolves. The fox embodies strategic wisdom, the ability to detect deception and navigate complex social terrain. The lion represents raw power, the strength to confront threats and protect one's rule. In the end, it is this balance of strength and cunning, of institutions and individuals, that creates enduring leadership. A simple desire lies at the heart of the people, not to be dominated or oppressed by the powerful. The nobility, on the other hand, desire nothing more than to dominate and oppress. This creates a troubling cycle. Our leadership selection systems may be systematically choosing precisely the wrong kinds of people for positions of power. Those most eager to lead are often the least suited to do so wisely. Meanwhile, those best equipped to lead, quiet, wise, and empathetic, are often reluctant to seek power. Consider Nelson Mandela. He did not ascend to South Africa's presidency through ambition or power-seeking, but through the moral authority he earned during 27 years of imprisonment. His leadership, centered on reconciliation rather than retribution, proves that transformational change can come from those who don't fit the Machiavellian mold. Similarly, Abraham Lincoln was once dismissed as awkward and unpolished. Yet his calm, thoughtful, and empathetic leadership was uniquely capable of guiding America through its most profound crisis. These rare exceptions suggest that while our default systems tend to reward narcissists and manipulators, other pathways to power are possible. Machiavelli once wrote, "Therefore, it is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them." This famously cynical remark reflects Machiavelli's pragmatic view of leadership ethics. But it would be a mistake to interpret it as a mere call for deception. Rather, Machiavelli was revealing a deeper psychological truth, that perception often outweighs reality in leadership and challenging us to build better systems in response. If appearances often triumph over substance in the selection of leaders, then how can we ensure that those in power truly possess the qualities we need? The answer may lie in redesigning our selection systems to account for these psychological biases. History offers fascinating examples. The Venetian Republic, for instance, used a complex blend of election and random selection to choose its doge, its head of state, in part to prevent any one faction from seizing control. In other societies, leaders were required to step down at intervals, curbing the psychological corruption that often comes with prolonged power. Today, modern organizations are experimenting with similar ideas. Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, has implemented what founder Ray Dalio calls radical transparency. In this system, leadership decisions are openly critiqued by employees at all levels. Even the CEO undergoes regular anonymous evaluations. This structure helps dismantle the echo chambers that typically protect narcissistic leadership styles. Drawing from both Machiavellian insight and modern psychological research, there are several reforms organizations can adopt to shield themselves from manipulative or corrupt leadership. First, they must value real-world results over interview performance. Studies show that past behavior is a far stronger predictor of future performance than how someone acts in a high-stakes conversation. Next, instead of granting permanent authority up front, organizations should implement mandatory trial periods. During this time, feedback should be gathered from every level of the hierarchy through what's known as a 360-degree review before any long-term commitments are made. Another safeguard: separate the power to propose actions from the power to approve them. When both reside in a single individual, it creates a dangerous concentration of influence and invites unchecked manipulation. To avoid groupthink and ensure key decisions are stress-tested, organizations should also appoint a formal devil's advocate. Their role is to challenge assumptions, question leadership, and ensure that alternative perspectives are heard. Lastly, implementing term limits and regularly rotating leadership roles can prevent the psychological decay that comes from holding on to power too long. Left unchecked, power inevitably corrupts. And that's something Machiavelli understood better than most. Perhaps most crucially, his wisdom suggests we should focus less on the character of individual leaders and more on the design of the institutions that constrain them. As he wrote, A prince, therefore, being compelled knowingly to adopt the beast, ought to choose the fox and the lion. Because the lion cannot defend himself against snares, and the fox cannot defend himself against wolves. One must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten off wolves. The fox symbolizes strategic wisdom, the ability to detect deception and navigate complexity. Finally, we can begin to educate ourselves about these psychological patterns. By understanding how narcissism, strategic deception, and false simplicity shape our perception of leadership, we become less vulnerable to their appeal. We learn to distinguish between genuine confidence and narcissistic self-promotion, between strategic communication and manipulative deception, between accessible simplicity and intellectual laziness. The truly Machiavellian leader, in the best sense of the word, sees through the games of power, while still holding on to a moral compass that points toward real human flourishing. And the truly Machiavellian citizen understands these dynamics well enough to choose leaders who serve the common good, not their own grandiosity. So let me ask you this. What aspects of leadership selection have you seen backfire in your own experience? Have you ever witnessed someone rise to power without falling into these darker patterns? I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. And if this message resonated with you, or if you know someone whose position or perspective could benefit from hearing it, share it with them. Because sometimes, the right insight at the right moment can shift how someone sees everything. If you found value in this exploration of leadership psychology, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden forces shaping our world. Until next time, in a world that rewards princes, be wise enough to see through the crown.